Hello, everybody, and welcome to Midweek Momentum. If you tuned into the full podcast episode on Monday with Steve Woodruff, May the 4th be with you, by the way. You know, we talked a whole lot about a little tiny word that has big impact, and that is clarity. And I loved this conversation. If you didn't have not listened to the full episode, I highly recommend you do it for a few reasons. One, we had a nice little 6 to 7 minute live coaching, live synthesis of my own clarity insofar as it comes to introducing myself and talking about what I do in sound bites to new people. Super, super impactful for me, and a really nice case study for all of you to see. Hey, sometimes we coaches walk the walk and talk the talk. But what I loved about our conversation was this idea that we don't just think our way to clarity, right? Sometimes we feel like the idea comes first and then clarity will come through it. I deal with this a lot with coaches who are trying to implement new programs, or even business leaders trying to like unroll something, right? We get caught in that like needs to be perfect. If I overthink my way to like some level of clarity, it will just roll out and be great. However, you can't necessarily be clear on what you're trying to do until you go test drive some stuff. Clarity is a byproduct of action. It isn't actually a prerequisite to taking it. And so common traps of this kind of like lack of clarity, which by the way is oftentimes a hindrance to communicating clearly, whether it's at home, whether it's on a team, whether it's in your business, right? We love knowing lots of stuff, and we think everybody needs to know lots of stuff. One of the things I talked about with Steve is the fact that I do that at home. I'm a highly contextual human. So when I close my computer at the end of the day and I go to talk to Jim, I would like to give him all the context of the day before I tell him the one 5-word sentence that he actually needs to hear. And sometimes he'll stop me and be like, hey, you're giving me all kinds of backstory that he doesn't need. And so as you get out there and you become active in your ideas to gain clarity in how others receive them, you start to get a better system of what gets responses and what creates conversation and what actually creates stickiness, because it is usually not the 7-minute info dump, because nobody listens to anything for 7 minutes anymore. I don't even know if they ever did. However, you're not going to become clear on your messaging, on who your clients are, on what services you offer, on what kind of team member you need to hire, on what the priorities of the business are, unless you get out there and you drive around and you kind of gather information in real time. And so in order to do that, we have to stop falling into the common traps of I'll do it when I feel ready, or I'll have clarity. Once I have clarity, I will be ready, right? Overthinking, analysis paralysis, perfectionism, trying to plan the whole scenario before you've taken one small step. You know, interestingly enough, related to this, I was chatting with a client over the last few weeks about a business he really wants to start. And he's falling into a trap of keeping himself from even dangling the carrot to start the conversation, because in his head, he has already assumed an outcome of where the conversation is going to go and rendered starting it useless. However, that assumption is dangerous to make, because what happens if it doesn't go that way? And also the starting point is necessary in order to have clarity for future conversations. So whether it's a business idea you haven't tested, decisions you keep revisiting, and analysis paralysis, right? Decision fatigue, pivoting your career, make a move, right? This world's changing fast, and the longer we wait, the more opportunity that we're going to miss, whether that is living life on purpose, whether that's doing more meaningful work, whether that is starting the thing or planting the shade tree we should have planted 20 years ago. If we wait for complete clarity and certainty and prioritize that over iteration, we're going to fall into the perfectionist trap. And perfectionism is a hindrance more than it is a help. So I want you to think about, coming off the heels of my conversation with Steve Woodruff, the clarity king, is you gain it through action. Talk to people who know you and know your strengths and your skills. Go out and be curious about yourself and about others. Test drive some ideas and some sound bites to see how they are received, because then you will have a loop to kind of perfect, maybe let's say optimize things without feeling like you have to wait until everything is crystal clear, figured out, and perfect to make a move. My challenge for you as you push through the rest of this week is take a tiny step. Take a tiny step. There you go. There's a soundbite you're going to remember I said this week. Take one small step, gather some data, adjust, and do it again. What are you waiting to feel clear on before you act? And what small step can you do to change that this week?